Right, folks. Let's get into this prediction. I might as well get it out now since it's in about 5 days. The 115-pound unification for the WBA and WBO titles being contested between WBO strap holder Kazuto Ioka and the WBA title holder who was recently elevated to, or I suppose should I say, due to Estrada being stripped of the belt, him, I guess, therefore inheriting the highest standing in the WBA and therefore being the WBA champion at 115 pounds. Confusing shit, whatever. Right. Joshua Franco holds the WBA belt. Ioka holds the WBO belt. They're getting it on in a unification. The first unification since Estrada versus Chocolatito, which was kind of foreign territory for the 115-pound division, as unifications due to mandatories consistently interrupting potential fights. The WBC pretty much incessantly forcing unifications when Inoue was there, preventing him from getting really any type of big fight, and of course Chocolatito getting knocked out when the fight was meant to be set. And obviously, beforehand, I think it was that Chocolatito Estrada fight was the first unification since Miharis Darchinian in 2007 or 2008. Anyways, we're getting another unification in the division, and this is probably to determine the number 2 in the division. Ioka has been champion since 2019, June of 2019, when he defeated the Filipino Austin Palicte, who pretty much got his standing by drawing, or a contentious draw with Donny Nietes. Ioka fought Nietes, lost controversially in a fight where I felt he won personally. I thought it was a little closer than some people made out, but I thought he did enough to get the job done, especially in the last 5 rounds of the fight. So for this fight, we have Joshua Franco as well. We all know Ioka's standing. He's been one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world probably for the last 10 years. In the case of Joshua Franco, he's someone of far lesser pedigree, but definitely is more so on the upswing than Ioka, who might be showing sort of signs of aging, definitely a little bit of athletic, depletion. In the case of Joshua Franco, he seems to be trending upwards as he's came off of 2 victories against Andrew Maloney, 3 straight fights. The second fight, which he should have been ruled stopped in, Robert Byrd somehow ruled that there was a headbutt despite there being absolutely no video evidence, or them at least not showcasing any video evidence to suggest that he was the recipient of a headbutt with enough impact to create such visceral damage. They still somehow deduced, they were like, fuck it, headbutt, fight's over, no contest. But he proved his pedigree once again, coming back in the third fight and pretty much winning in similar fashion to how he did in the first fight. Winning by virtue of superior conditioning, being physically the stronger man, and due to his relatively well layered attacks to some extent, at least with his double jab, and his very good counterpunching on the way and his excellent timing, especially with the straight right hand over the top when Maloney would duck in to try to get inside. All of those attributes pretty much allowed for him to outwork and outmuscle and pretty much exhibit his superior strength, to an Andrew Maloney, who is quite happy on his feet, similarly to actually his brother. Both guys can be forced to reset. Now, they use the outside, but they only really fight on the outside, at least to create angles to get close, or to, look to circle around the opponent's lead hand. In that case, Franco didn't really use his lead hand that much. He wasn't really looking to parry or probe or stick out his lead hand, so he didn't really leave many counterpunching opportunities for Maloney on the outside. He used a relatively inactive high guard, and while Maloney had success early on the inside, it was relatively short-lived as he started to gas, and Franco just started to come on more and more and more, and his strength just proved to be too much. He was starting to time and keep up with Maloney a bit more in exchanges, and ultimately he ended up winning a clear unanimous decision, as was the case in the first fight, although Maloney I thought fought a bit better in the trilogy fight. The fights before then, of course, were against... He was stopped by Lucas Fernandez in 2018, but he came back with a win against Oscar Negrete in their second fight. But the second and third fight that he had with Negrete were draws. This third fight was somewhat contentious, with many feeling that Franco might have deserved to win the fight. I thought it was very close anyways. Negrete, a bit of a crude fighter, but I thought kind of exposed Joshua Franco a little bit. Franco, I think, made the right decision moving down in weight after that fight. Negrete isn't quite Franco's size, but Franco definitely struggled on the inside, defensively, and, through very basic things, just flurries to the body and basic little frames, Negrete was able to shut down much of Franco's counterpunching game, and he wasn't able to create space, quickly enough. At least with his feet. He has decent foot speed, but he's not one of those guys who can constantly step back, counter, step back, counter, step back, counter with explosiveness, say akin to like a Floyd. So he really struggled to some extent to really keep Negrete honest, and he was being forced into exchanges that, a lot of 50-50 type of exchanges. So that's certainly an area, in my view, in this fight that he's going to have to improve on if he wants to win. As far as my view of how this fight's going to go, I do view it as a bit of a 55-45 type of a fight in favor of Ioka. Maybe 50-50, honestly. Because one thing with Ioka is his past 3 performances. Well, I'll give him a pass on the Nietes performance, because that was, sort of a return to form for Ioka. He showed the type of attributes he needed to show in many of his previous fights. But we have seen, say, for example, his fight against Ryoji Fukunaga. He was using his length. He was pretty much just throwing 1-2s, a bit of a jab and right hand heavy sort of a game plan, trying to pick at and punch through the Ioka's high guard. But he was still having success, and he was still able to keep Ioka at bay and force Ioka actually to use his feet a bit more in the mid to late rounds, as him trying to stand in the pocket and go counter for counter with the bigger man, despite the fact that Fukunaga is not really of a particularly high level, really not really beyond domestic level. Got a gift decision against, Hayate Kaji and shit, but in that fight, I mean, he was struggling quite a bit. But one thing with Ioka is he is known to fluctuate in terms of form. There are certain fights where he'll go against, physically strong or big or, quick guys, and he'll look dominant, he'll look, classy. He'll look like he's able to keep up, and he'll definitely be a bit more alert. Like, he was very, very alert and ready for what Tanaka brought to the table, and what Cintron brought to the table in certain terms of his spoiling tactics, and Arroyo, who was the bigger man in their fight. But for example, in the Rodriguez fight, in the first 4 rounds, he looked half asleep. And it took really about until the 5th and 6th rounds for him to finally start to pick things up and, really get back to his sharpshooting. But even still, his conditioning, especially down the stretch of the fight, Rodriguez tired a bit too, but Ioka definitely didn't hold as strong as he did in, the Palikte fight, or even in the Nietes fight, where he basically fought at the same pace for 12 rounds, really showed no signs of slowing down. Obviously, Nietes is a bit of an old man, so I guess that's not the best measuring stick for comparison, but one thing is, it's quite hard to gauge what type of form Ioka is at, and the fact is, he is fighting bigger men. He's not someone who's an explosive or, huge athlete who cuts tons of weight, say, like a Naoya Inoue. He's a very small guy himself, and he's a pudgy 115-pounder fighting bigger men on a pretty routine basis. Pretty much hasn't really been big for any specific weight class that he's obviously campaigned in since 108 pounds. So those are things that he's going to need to watch for, and he's fighting a former bantamweight. And Franco, in my view, one area where he could really give Ioka a lot of issues is that counter right hand. As effective as Ioka is with his defense, and he's one of the best defensively in the sport, his combination of parrying, his active guard, his upper body movement, his pre-slipping, his angles on the inside, his ability to fight out of a multitude of different guards, just period, not even just as a feinting sort of weapon or as a decoy, he definitely does tend to get clipped with the overhand right at mid-range due to his tendency to slip sort of duck around the waist and expose the left side of his head as he tries to stick out his left hand sort of to parry punches. that's where I think Joshua Franco's best shot is going to come into play. But my issue with Franco in terms of picking him to win the fight, which I think he has the physical attributes and some of the skills needed to, is he's fought so many one-dimensional opponents, and Andrew Maloney is not as good defensively as Ioka. He's bigger than Ioka, but he's not as good defensively, and he's not as nuanced. He doesn't have an active guard himself, and I just don't know really how Joshua Franco is going to really counteract Ioka's active guard and his lead hand work. I don't think I'm not sure how well he's going to be able to counteract his counterpunching abilities. I think the fact that Franco has quite an inactive high guard will allow for Ioka to oftentimes be able to control the center of the ring, and I think his body punching may allow him to garner Franco's respect in the fight and could end up slowing him down. I don't know, but personally, I'm just not quite ready to pick Franco in a fight like this. He hasn't quite shown me the levels or the multitude of skills, or hasn't quite fought the level of opponent that can adjust and adapt and fight as effectively and as seamlessly on the inside as Ioka does, who has fought bigger men on the inside, like a Felix Alvarado, and been able to outpoint him and shown good defense and showed a good, shoulder roll and been able to frame punches. And I think the fact that Franco oftentimes doesn't really throw much of a stiff jab is going to allow him to be very open to get pinned and framed, and that's just going to create a lot of opportunities for Ioka on the inside. And if Franco cannot outwork and outdo and outfight Ioka on the inside, he's going to lose this fight, and that's my feeling. So I'm thinking Kazuto Ioka wins this fight on points in a relatively close fight, 7-5 type, which would make him obviously he's already a 4-weight world champion, but that would make him unified champion twice, as he's already been unified at the 105-pound weight category when he unified against Yagashi in June of 2012. So 10 years apart, or almost 11 years apart, in 4 different weight classes, or 3 weight classes up from 105 pounds, he'll have become unified champion once again, if he's able to mount this feat. And, I mean, there's really no argument that after that he'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And on another hand, if Joshua Franco's able to pull this off, then he's legit. He's a top guy at 115 pounds, and, well, in his case, he's someone who I won't say necessarily has entered pound-for-pound discussions, because there's definitely still some more work out there for him at 115 pounds, guys who bring different styles and more physical attributes than Ioka that he might need to prove in order for me to rank him up, with those guys. But at the same time, he's definitely come quite a long way, definitely, since his loss to Fernandez, and has done some very good things for himself. And with this one, this would be definitely a legacy-defining sort of a victory for him at any point in his career. So good luck to both guys, but I got Ioka winning this fight.